So welcome everyone to the final session of our Roman Villa Shawl KAL. And I'm really excited, as I said a little bit earlier, that for everyone to join us here. I hope that you've been enjoying the progress of your shawl knitting and are having a lot of fun taking a tour through a Roman villa. We're going to start the meeting off today with a little bit of general housekeeping. So we're going to have everybody's mics muted for a little while here. And that'll give me a chance to give you another little chunk of interesting history and tell you about some prizes and things like that. But a good part of this session is I'm hoping that we can do some show and tell. So you'll get a chance to ask any questions that you want, show off your project, show how far you've come, and, just generally do a little bit of a knit along, show and tell, have fun moment. So we can also, all through the entire thing, be asking questions in the chat. And what we will do is that the Ancient Arts staff, if they see a question that I need to answer at that moment, will just break in and let me know. So they'll read the question out for me. Some of them may need to wait a little while, and we'll do that in the second half of our presentation when we do our show and tell / questions. I did see one just pop up there, and I would be very happy to address that as soon as I get to a point where it will be suitable for me to give it a little bit more time. So, like I say, for anybody who's just joining now, we are recording. So if you don't want to be visible on the recording, just turn your camera off. That's just fine. Okay. I had down in my little notes for the beginning here, because I always have to remember all these things to say about we can enable closed captioning if anybody needs that. And then the next part is to tell you about the prizes for this evening. So we're going to draw 4 more prizes this evening, because what is a KAL without prizes? And we have a guest visiting us today, who is Katie from Atelier Nekozuki. And she and I have partnered up to create the grand prize for this evening and a second prize that will be drawn based on social media posts. So we have 4 prizes tonight, consisting of a beautiful Nekozuki project bag, complete with skein of yarn of your choice. Must be in stock. Then we have a set of beautiful rainbow blocking pins. So somebody's going to win that. And then we're giving away 2 other prizes of our Lasco Fine ebook. So we'll be drawing those from the people in the session at the time. So you'll want to stick around, because it's too hard to draw and know who's here and who left and who came back and all the rest of it. So you definitely want to be in the meeting while we draw for the prizes. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is start off, now that I have done some housekeeping, with our first prize. And randomly, I did some earlier planning of which order they'll go in. And we're going to draw for a Lasco Fine ebook. So this is for our collection that includes 14 patterns. And we are very proud of this ebook because we put an awful lot of work into it, and it is a collection of designs from designers from around the world. So we have sweaters, we have shawls, we have accessories, you name it, it's there, and you'll find something fun to knit. And if you have fallen in love with Lasco, then you will really enjoy using that same yarn for those particular patterns. Admittedly, the book is in the Lasco Fine, not the DK that this shawl is made in. Still, it's the same wool. So Heather, if you are ready to announce your winner. Heather, as soon as you leaned forward, you muted it.
Sorry. First prize goes to Grace Franks. Please contact Wendy. I'm just going to put the information in our chat.
Excellent. So when you win a prize, and congratulations, Grace, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to email Wendy at sales@ancientartsfiber.com, and then you can claim your prize. It's important that you do contact us, because once we're done here, we won't have access to you to message you and let you know that we haven't heard from you. So you definitely want to make sure to contact us. Okay, so next, in this particular session, I just wanted to remind anybody who has joined the KAL a little bit later, because we've had people joining this week, if you're still planning colors, or if you want to knit a second shawl, because we have some people who are on shawl number 2, you want to make sure when you're choosing your colors to choose 2 lighter colors, a medium color, and 2 darker colors, so that you get enough contrast in your mosaic bands. With that being said, I have seen a number of absolutely exquisite shawls where people have broken those rules and it still worked beautifully. So there's one where they had chosen kit number 2 and they flipped the colors around, the green and the nutmeg. And it's really, really pretty. You definitely want to go to the Facebook group and check it out there because it's a lovely shawl. And I saw a post this afternoon of it now that it's finished. And clever knitter, the leftover yarn is enough to make yourself a hat or a hat and mitts. So she made a pair of beautiful mosaic gloves that you're going to want to go and have a look at. So just a reminder, if you're doing a second shawl or you're joining later, 2 light, 1 medium, and 2 darker will give you nice contrast in your mosaic sections in your shawl. If you find that you don't have enough contrast in the first band that you did in mosaic, it doesn't really matter on that first one because it's a Greek key. I'll hold that up so that you see that in front of me. And whether it has strong contrast or not, you're still going to see the pattern. Where you will want more contrast is when you get to the section with the birds. So if you aren't really happy with your mosaic contrast in the first band, switch it up for this one. Having 2 different sets of colors in the mosaic bands is actually really pretty. And I've seen a fair number of people do that and I really enjoyed it. Was kind of thinking, ooh, I wish I'd thought of that myself when I designed it because it's really nifty. So next I wanted to do something fun, which is to give you some more history on Roman villas. And you'll probably spot a pattern that I've been using, which is I've been working from the floor up in the villas. So we started off with the mosaics themselves and looked at some pictures of mosaics and talked about how they're constructed. Then we went to villas in general and talked a little bit, oh my goodness, there's a very large cat trying to get on the table with me. Talked a little bit about the way that they're laid out, floor plans, that sort of thing. So tonight I thought I'd give you some of the more big picture information about Roman villas. So one of the things that you see a lot when you're looking into the subject is, this is a wonderful quote here, the villa holds a central place in the history of Western architecture. And that's one of the things that really fascinates me about Roman villas, is that they started off being built and recognized as the thing that we all know and love when we look at archaeology around 500 BC. And they kept on being built for about 900 years. And then they kind of tapered off in terms of being specifically Roman villas. Heavy sigh. Pardon the Zoom bombing by Lily, studio cat extraordinaire. They started changing after about the 3rd and 4th century because of the collapse of the Roman Empire itself. But the interesting thing about Roman villas is that the architectural form actually keeps reappearing throughout history and keeps getting reinvented and brought back. So you'll still see layouts on floor plans of country houses that are very reminiscent of ancient Roman villas being constructed today. And some of our societal expectations of roles and go away, Lily. Sorry. Roles and so on are actually based on the structure of the Roman villa and how people lived in them. So the villa continues as a concept through time and as an architectural form that gets reinvented and reused. So like I say, Roman villas have been around since about 500 BC, and they came in a number of different forms. So they kind of broke down into 2 main uses. One was that they would be used as an agricultural center. So you would have, say, a farm, and the Roman villa would be the place where everybody who was working that farm would be based. The other one is more of a political role and more of elaborate pleasure palace kind of thing. So you would have the one set of Roman villas where they would be fairly near to a big city, and you would have the rich people would have their country house, and it would often be associated with, say, a particular family. So you'll find a lot of emperors will have their fancy country villa, very palatial, in beautiful landscapes and so on. And then it'll be associated with a lot of political maneuverings. Sometimes important people, like, for example, Julia Augustus's daughter, get exiled to Roman villas in fancy places because they have committed some terrible ill as far as the emperor would see it. And so this would become a place of exile. But this is always associated with this political element to villas. So you'll see them quite often, very large villas, and it'll be a place of government too. So for example, in Britain, some of the villas are very large and they would persist for hundreds of years. And that's because they had become a center of political power, or they could become a center of industrial trade. And, you know, everyone would come there because they would be on an important road. So villas, They broke down into the country house and they broke down into the political uses and power centers. You get a whole bunch of different types. So you get the pleasure houses with the very, very elaborate statuary and the very, very precise, beautiful columns and so on. You also get the country house, so a little bit more modest. So you get a guy who, you know, managed to get a wife who had some money, and he went out and he built this villa, and he had some servants and some slaves, and they're all working the fields. This idea actually is a big part of what Romans loved about the villa idea. It was this epitome of the perfect Roman citizen, the person who would own a country home and be completely self-sufficient. They would eat their own fruits from the fields and they would drink their own wines. And this was just considered to be the epitome of the best person in society. You'd get suburban houses as well. So you see a lot of Roman villas built in the outskirts of Rome itself. They're still there to this day, and some of them are actually still being occupied. Others, of course, are archaeological sites that you can go and visit. You will also see, as I mentioned earlier, sites of power. So regional governments will often be associated with a Roman villa that's really big, so they can have a huge courtyard, for example. One of Hadrian's villas was like 300 meters across, absolutely enormous. So, you know, people like to measure things in football fields, and if you want to put it that way, that's 3 football fields wide. You'd also get them as organizational centers, as I said, for agriculture. And that could be that you would have a family who would be dominant in the area, and then a lot of the crops would be brought there, a lot of trade would take place, and you often saw other industries growing up around there. If you like to watch Time Team, they actually have an archaeological dig on a big Roman villa that was very much like that. So as they finished their dig, they realized that this is one of these centers where the villa had actually been rebuilt multiple times as they became wealthier, and it became a more important center for them. And there were other trades that were associated with it in terms of separate buildings. So lots and lots of uses there. Of course, they're also associated with being imperial homes because they are a statement of wealth. And mosaics, of course, are definitely a statement of wealth because you have to have a lot of money to pay artists to come and construct those beautiful, beautiful floors. And then, of course, they were also luxury vacation homes. So you can still see in modern day society the idea of the luxury vacation home being a lovely house somewhere in the country. So you can see how this use has echoed through the thousands of years between us and the Romans who were living with those lovely floors. Let's see. So society today is actually structured off of Roman villas to some degree as well, because in the Roman villa, you get separate different areas. So you have the area of the villa that's all fancy and lovely, and that's where the family will live. So the owner of the villa themselves and their immediate family. Then you have another section of the villa, and that's where your servants and slaves and cooks all live together. And it's a lot less fancy. And the two of them don't necessarily associate. They'll just be one corridor where they can get back and forth between each other. But it's just like if you think about the big English country houses, how they have the division between the classes, and they will have different floors and different sections, and the servants were supposed to be hidden. You were never in an English country home supposed to see the servants. They were supposed to hide. So you see this structure coming from that. And then the other thing that you would have would be separate sections for things like storerooms and places like that, your industrial manufacture areas too. So again, you'll see that in the way that we break down our cities. So if you think about it, we have the neighborhoods that have the people who are wealthy. We have the neighborhoods for the people who do the basic work, and you have the neighborhoods that are industrial. So it's really interesting how this division of both buildings and cities as a whole really descends from Roman society. So I thought that was a really interesting element. And that's one of the things that I thought was really cool about doing a shawl based on a Roman villa, is you've got all of these elements of history being put into it. So one of the things I wanted to show you about Roman villas that's really fun is that they could be incredibly elaborate and they could have in-floor heating. And I have a number of different pictures that I'm going to show you, including one that I was dared by my staff to show you. So I'm going to do a share screen. So Romans really liked their comforts, and they would have in-floor heating with a system that's called a hypocaust. And this is a bathhouse. And what you see is that open area that has all these little stacked pillars. So what that was a hollow underneath the floor. And you can see that in the corner there at the back, there was a mosaic. So they would put a floor over this open space, put a mosaic on top of it, and then they would have a furnace that would put heat into that area underneath the floor. And they would also have hollows in the walls so that it could move around. So they had in-floor heating. And it's kind of interesting to see how long it took Western society nowadays to come back to the in-floor heating idea, with putting like a concrete floor down and pipes that you can pump hot water through the floors with. So these hypocausts were really interesting. They really liked having hypocausts in their bathhouses because they had very, very elaborate rituals around bathing. They spent a lot of time in bathhouses, and it was a really important feature of the wealthier villas. So this is the hypocaust, partly fallen apart. And this is a bathhouse. So that weird, looks like a pit to the side there is actually part of the bath structure. It just is missing all of its beautiful plaster and stairs. So this is a plan that's drawn out of a Roman villa with the hypocaust in-floor heating system. And you can see there's a little furnace. They elevate the floors so that the hot air can circulate underneath there. And then you can see that the bricks that make up the walls in the interior of the wall are actually hollow. That allows the hot air to flow through them. So they had heated homes, central heating, long before anybody thought about putting a modern furnace in. So it's interesting how when the Roman Empire fell apart, we lost a lot of these luxuries, and it took 1,000 years to get some of them back. So I thought this was a really great way to look at how these are structured. This is a drawing of a villa, and I thought I would include this one because this is a great way to show you how they would be laid out for different groups of people and different purposes. So you notice how the back right-hand corner there is really fancy, and it has a pond in the middle and columns. That would be the area that your family would be living in, and they would want luxury and decadence. The two-story section there would be some decadence, so they'd have their fancy dining halls in there, for example, but in the back, underneath, you'd have little teeny tiny rooms, and that's where your servants and slaves would live. If you do a little bit of Googling, there were some exciting things found in Pompeii over the last year. And one of the things that they found was a room that had been occupied by servants and slaves. So they had a really good idea about how it was laid out. And those poor people were living with like a whole bunch of storage jars, and they had to cram their stuff under their beds. And it was not a fancy pants kind of room. So this layout shows some of that. And then you see the area in the front of the picture where they have various different crafts going on. They have storage jars and so on. So this gives you an idea of some of the layouts that you might see. And then of course there are gardens associated, because any luxury house or country villa, you would try and have at least one garden associated, because this again was a luxury and it was good for the soul, and you would entertain in those areas too. This is another set of hypocausts, and you can see these archways where the furnaces would have transmitted air. This is a really big set of Roman baths. And so you've got all of these hexagonal buildings and this huge system going underneath to heat the floors underneath. And it would have also heated the baths themselves. This is a picture that I thought was really cute because you can see the furnace. Now the furnace was run by the slaves. So you would have the furnace, and that's on the outside of the house. And some poor guy is deputated to sit out there and throw logs on the fire. And then it would act like a chimney. The air would be sucked into the floor and then up through the walls and out the top at the end, so that the entire house was heated, and the nice rich people would be enjoying their beautiful mosaic floors and handy dandy, nice temperatures. This one is a picture of Roman baths, and this made me laugh because this picture comes from a book for kids, and I was like, alrighty then. So the way that this works is this is a fancy bathhouse, and you go in where it is lettered A, and this is where you will change your clothes. And in lots of bathhouses, this is also where you would scrub off the worst of the dirt. You can then go into an area which is labeled B, which is, they will have a gymnasium sometimes attached to these. So you can do a little bit of, leaping abouting and wrestling and things like that. Then you come back in and you go into area C, and this is where you're going to relax, and you're going to maybe have a nice massage, get oiled up by poor Mr. Slave who has to, deal with all of the obnoxious people coming in there. And then you're going to go into area D, and you're going to have a nice steamy sauna. And from there, you can go into area E, and there would be sometimes multiple baths. So you would have a hot bath, and then you could also have a cold bath. And depending on where you stood in society, you would maybe skip the cold bath. So ladies sometimes didn't do the cold bath, or you could do both because it was considered invigorating to experience the temperature changes. And then down on the bottom right, you see poor Joe Slave there with his logs, and he's having to feed the fire so that he can keep those hypocausts going. So I thought that system was really neat, and I wasn't sure if you guys were aware of that, but it is quite fascinating that they had those in-floor heatings. So why don't we see Roman villas still being built today? Well, again, like I say, it's the collapse of the Roman Empire that really got rid of the form in some ways. So official Roman villas started to be abandoned. So for example, in Britain, you see them abandoned in the 4th century. Sometimes they'd last a little bit longer, but they tended to fade out as the empire pulled back and went into this whole disintegration, reformatting, new societies coming up. But they did continually get reinvented. And one of the ways that I thought was really fascinating for the way that they reinvented them was, you remember the frescoes from last meeting? They would look at pictures in the frescoes of how people were living in Roman villas, because in villas, you would put frescoes and you would actually depict the life of the villa in those pictures. So some of the ones would be like windows where you could look into a house or where you were looking out. And so people were actually using those frescoes in ruins to get an idea of how a villa should be built. So some of the houses that you see to this day will be built based on pictures in frescoes. So I thought that was really cool. All righty. So that brings us to the end of our little history lecture, which means that it is time to draw a prize. So Heather, randomly we are going to draw for our lovely set of rainbow knit blockers. Now these are really nifty, and I love these because if you look carefully there, silly reflections, but it's a pin that has a whole bunch of pins. So instead of having to put individual pins in when you're blocking, you can use this set of pins, and it's very handy when you're doing things like straight lines or you need a lot of pins close together. So I love these Knitter's Pride blockers, and I really like this rainbow set because they're pretty colors. I have some sets of white ones, and they're nowhere near as exciting as the rainbow blockers. So would you like to announce our winner, Heather?
Nancy Harrington is the winner of our blockers.
Yay! Congratulations, Nancy. All righty. So now that we have drawn a prize,
Caroline,
yes.
this is Nancy, and you just announced that I'd won a prize, and I won one at the first lecture.
Oh.
So I'd like to have somebody else drawn.
Well, isn't that sweet of you? Thank you, Nancy. That is very kind.
All right, I will see if I can find another winner.
Random number generation for the win.
Right?
That is super kind of you, Nancy. Thank you very much.
All right, so our next pick is Alison Mohan.
Congratulations, Alison.
I'm going to say the same thing. I won.
Oh my God.
I won it the very first thing too.
Oh, that's so
go
funny.
again.
All right, well, let's see what we can do. Woo!
Spin the wheel.
Right? Marilee Belanger.
All right, congratulations, Marilee, and thank you again, Alison. That's very, very generous of you. All right, so Marilee, what you will want to do is email Wendy to claim your prize. We will ship that out to you. And I hope you enjoy the blockers as much as I do. I will admit to 3 sets of them because I'm a bad girl, but only one of them's rainbow. The other 2 are white. Boring. Anyway, now, the last thing that I wanted to do before we do some show and tell and we get into questions is I wanted to show you one of the things that might baffle some of you, which is the final edging on the shawl. So last week we talked about picking up stitches and some tips on working the one mosaic border that is both stocking stitch and garter stitch. Oh my God, Katie, I just realized you're waiting for me to let you show off that project bag. Are you good for sticking around?
Yep, the kids are in the bath.
See, I told you I got really excited about all this history because it's like if I get to give a history lesson, it's like, woo! Anyway, okay, so we talked about these various things like picking up the stitches and then working on this band here. But the last thing that we will do on the shawl is finishing the edges off with I-cord. And I know that not everyone will have worked I-cord. And for those of you who have, it never hurts to have a refresher. I know I always enjoy that sort of thing myself. So I'm going to show you the 2 different ways that it's worked on this shawl. Now, the bottom edge of the shawl, what's going to happen is you're going to have a bazillion stitches and you're going to bind them off with this I-cord. So it will get rid of those stitches as you go. which is a really nifty way to deal with it. And it means that you don't have to do any actual like casting off except for the last couple of stitches, which I love. And then the other part of the shawl that has I-cord is on that edge that was slipped before. And so we finished it off with an I-cord. Now, if you are a kind of person who hates I-cord and doesn't want to do this on the top edge, you don't have to. You can just leave that as the slip stitched edge and it'll be just fine. It's not going to roll on you or do anything rude. But I like the idea of having this nice firm edge on the top, getting it close to the camera here, because it gives me something to grab onto and it does help to, again, support the shawl in general. It's worked a little bit differently in both places because one of them you are binding off stitches as you work the I-cord, and in the other one you are not. So I'm going to show you both of them. And at this point in time, Dan, if you can spotlight our delightful presentation camera, that would be lovely.
Caroline, when you have a second, we also have a question about the bind off. Someone's having problems with the number of stitches.
Mhm.
And so the question or the question is, do you cast off first? Sorry, I'm just trying to like scroll down just a little bit, which is hard to do in the chat.
Yeah.
And go
Sorry,
back to create the cord, or do you bind off doing the cord?
You bind off doing the cord. So that's why I have this swatch here where I'm going to show you the bind off. Okay. Now this is a bit dark and
Caroline, I asked the question, can you also just explain how the colors switch? Because I ended up somehow with 8 fewer stitches, so.
that's interesting. Dan, I'm gonna get you to come down here and help me turn on this light because I cannot find a stitch and I need more light on this. So if you can do that, that would be fantastic because we need more light on our subject because I look like I have black yarn when I don't. So I'm not exactly certain what that question is. I got to deal with that after I've done the I-cord one. Oh, for heaven's sakes. So for those of you who are going to laugh at me, I had to turn a knob.
And you can also, if you need more, you can click up the exposure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So my dearly beloved set this all up for me in advance. And then of course, as the sun goes down, everything changes, which messes it up. So I'm going to come back to your question about those stitches and I'm going to help with that. But first I'm going to do this I-cord thing. So here we are with our pretend swatch. Well, it's a real swatch, but our pretend shawl. And now we're going to get rid of these stitches. So instead of having to cast them off and do a decorative edge on them as afterwards, we're going to do them all together. When you're changing colors within the I-cord, because that of course will be something that people will ask, you will end up with an end to sew in because you're going to have to change the colors. But I-cord is really great because what you can do when you sew in those ends is you can just run it inside the I-cord itself and you'll never see it. So that's a great way to get rid of those ends. So to start this, what you'll do at the beginning is you are going to cast on 3 stitches, making sure that I'm under the camera. And the way that you're going to do this is with a knitted cast on. So just like I learned when I was a wee little girl, we're going to cast on by adding 3 stitches. And the instructions for this are on page 3 of your pattern in the bottom right-hand corner. Now you can also use backwards loop. The instructions actually say backwards loop because you get less of a big chunk on the bottom, but I often just do the knitted one and that's what I'm doing right now. Really doesn't make any difference how you cast those on. Now I use this needle to cast my stitches on, but you're actually going to want to use a needle that's 1 size larger than the working needles here. And I have had some people ask me why. And the reason why is it gives you just a little bit of ease on your I-cord bind off. So if you're pulling it quite tight, then you have that little bit of ease, which means that it'll lie nice and flat and not pull your edge in. So I tend to just use a DPN for that. So this is 1 size larger than this needle here. And that will give me a nice short needle to work with because I'm never going to have more than 3 stitches on it anyway. So DPNs are a really handy way to do this. So if you look at your instructions, it will tell you to knit 2. So you're going to knit the first 2 stitches that you bound on. Waiting for this to focus. There we go. And then it says slip 1 knitwise with yarn in back. That whole big abbreviation is just put your needle in from the front as if to knit and pull the stitch over onto the right hand needle. Then what you're going to do is knit one, which is the stitch that you started with casting on in. Okay, sorry about that. Technical problems. So now we have 4 stitches on our right-hand needle. We're going to take this previous stitch here that we had slipped, and we're just going to pass that stitch over the one that we just knit. Then what we're going to do is take these 3 stitches, waiting for this little camera to catch up to me. There we go. And we're going to put them back on the left-hand needle. Oh, aren't you just a messy little thing? There we go. So we have a little bit of a wonky start on here, but as I keep going, you're going to see the I-cord forming. Now, the benefit to this is that we got rid of a stitch on the main body of the shawl while we did our I-cord at the same time. Autofocus, you. Come on, you can do it. There we go. So the same thing gets repeated over and over. You will have to do this to get rid of each stitch. Oh my goodness, my knitting today is terrible. So we're going to knit 2. Then what we're going to do is slip knitwise with the yarn in the back. Then we will knit 1, and then we will pass the slip stitch over. Now we've bound off 2 stitches. Then we pass the stitches back onto the left-hand needle. So I'm just going to keep doing this for a bit so that you can see the I-cord forming. You always knit 2, then you slip a stitch, knit 1, and pass the stitch over. I've seen this too where you're knitting 2 together, but it will give you a different edge along the side of your shawl. So you can see here, you've got the I-cord starting to form, and it will roll naturally as you keep going. And you see how it gives you a nice clean stocking stitch edge on it. So this is why we're doing this particular form here, is it gives you a really clean I-cord edge. And it's getting rid of your body stitches as you go. And I went a little faster there. Anybody who needs, whoops, okay. This is a great idea to show you a mistake. If you forget and you end up with 6 stitches, you're just going to have to tink back those 3 because you always have to pass the stitches back to your left-hand needle. So silly me, I did not do that. So I have to tink back my 3 stitches, and then I'm going to transfer those 3 stitches to the left. Yay, I love it when I make a mistake because then I can tell you how to fix the mistake. Okay, going back to your I-cord. You don't have to pull the yarn super tight. Don't worry about that roll of the I-cord. It will naturally start forming as you keep going. So you can see that this is starting to roll over on itself. And I'll hold still. And you can see that rolled I-cord there that's showing. So this is going to give you that nice clean edge on your shawl. Looks good on both sides because this is the back side. And the other purpose for doing the I-cord on the bottom is that it helps to stabilize that edge. So you don't have your edge flaring out or stretching or sagging over time. It gives it a nice firm edge. Lots of designers like to use the I-cord edge for that exact reason. It really does help to stabilize the edge of a big shawl, especially one that's quite elastic, and mosaic can be quite elastic. So pushing that a little further on there, you see how that's forming there? Waiting for the camera to focus. Yay. So are there any questions about that particular part of creating I-cord? Okay, good. Now, brutally, I am throwing this off of this needle and I'm going to take my little mini shawl that I created last time. And so you're knitting off the bottom edge. Let me just see what that says. There's a good question in the chat there. Can the I-cord edge be done in one color? Yes. There are various different amounts of your yarn left over. So what I would do is weigh your yarn balls and pick the one that's biggest, and you will definitely have enough yarn to make the whole thing in one color. I did it in multiple colors because it was reminding me of the border of a fresco and tiling, and I really like the effect of having multiple colors. And I do actually give you how many stitches will mean that all of your yarn is distributed and you won't run out of each individual color. But you could bind off, and most likely this is the one you're going to end up with. The main color of your shawl, the first one that you started with, that light color, because I think that's the one that I had the most left of. But you'll have a decent amount of the dark color too. So if you wanted to circle the shawl with black, then you can do that. This mimics your top edge of your shawl, and that's one of the I-cords that you're going to have to deal with. And this is a little more complicated. Now, the I-cord itself is exactly the same, but I wanted to go through the instructions with you so that you would know what you were doing on the top, because it's a little bit weird. So on page 13, it tells you how to deal with binding off on the bottom edge of your shawl, and that's where your numbers are. So it'll tell you to start with your main color, cast off 113 rows. That means do 113 rows of your I-cord. So that's your 3-stitch business. And then it tells you how many cast off with contrast color 1, 3, etc., so that you can mimic the border on the original shawl. You don't have to, and you can certainly change the proportions. And I know I saw one lady who emailed me at one point in time, and she had actually taken a completely different yarn and cast off with it, and it was sparkly, so it was kind of interesting. So once you've done the bottom of the shawl body, you've got all of the live stitches, and what live stitches are these guys that are sitting on your needle. Once you've gotten the last one bound off, what you're going to do there is that you are going to, and according to the instructions here, after all live stitches are cast off, work one more row of I-cord, and then you're going to cast off those 3 stitches, and that will give you this little teeny nub that's going to stick out just a little bit beyond the bottom of the shawl. And what's going to happen is that you're going to end up having to graft the 2 ends of the I-cord together. So that little bit of extra there gives you a place to sew together. Now, when you go to the top part, you're going to use a bigger needle yet. This is 2 sizes bigger than the needle that you knit the main shawl with. I have another feline helping me here. Anyway, the reason for the bigger needle being used to do the I-cord on the top border of the shawl is because every one of these equals 2 rows, and you're going to do 1 row of your I-cord for each one of the slip stitches. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is that you are going to put your needle in. You can do it on the loop, but you remember what we were talking about last time where you get a hole? So when I did my I-cord, I actually put my needle in underneath the loop and one more piece of yarn, one more leg of a stitch in. And then that meant that my I-cord didn't form holes up at the top. I'm sure that everybody is enjoying seeing your foot, but you are now sitting on what I need to be dealing with, Ms. Feline. So we'll just remove you. One annoyed kitten later. Okay, now the other thing that's really important to pay attention to on this is that it says beginning on the same corner of the shawl as you did when working the I-cord along the lower edge. So not the end that you just finished, but go back to the start, the place that you started, and you're going to work your I-cord on that end, starting on that end. And the reason why is that when you are picking up your I-cord along the top border, you see that line in the middle there? This is because you're putting your needle in through the shawl to cover this edge. And what it does is it rolls it to the inside, to the wrong side of the shawl. But if you start on the right side, so if you start where you had finished the bottom I-cord, then what will happen is this line's going to be on the front of your shawl. So you have to go back to the original corner so that you can work your I-cord going in the same direction. And then that means you get a nice clean edge along the top. So this is where I had begun my I-cord on the bottom, and I'm going to begin in the same place. So make sure to pay attention to those instructions right after the part that says change to needle C. Then what you're going to do is you're going to, again, use multiple colors if you want, but what you're going to do is work your I-cord by picking up as you go. You do not have to cast a bunch of stuff on. You're just going to pick up as you go. So we're going to start our I-cord here by going through the first stitch, and we will cast on 3 stitches. Okay, let's break this yarn off here and get some more. La la la, doing this under the camera where you can see it. So again, you can cast on in whatever way you want. You can use a backwards loop, you can do a knit on, cast on, but you're going to have to create your 3 stitches. And you notice they're big and floppy with this fatter needle, and that's intentional because you need some ease to be able to get that I-cord to travel nicely along. So once you have it cast on, you're going to knit your 2, slip the first one that you cast on, and then you're going to knit into there, pass 1 over. You only had to pick up 1 at the beginning and end up knitting into the same place again. Now, what we're going to do is pass those stitches back. Then we're going to knit 2. We're going to slip that 3rd stitch, And then we're going to stick our needle through. I'm going to make sure my camera can catch up with me under the next slip stitch and go one in. And we're going to knit a stitch through there. So we're going to pick it up and we're going to get rid of it at the same time. Now we're going to pass the stitch over. So your I-cord is starting to form here.
Caroline, we have two questions. One, Tina Cole has a question. She's had her hand up for a few minutes.
Hey.
And then Alison Mohan is asking if you're picking up and doing the I-cord, the second I-cord on the wrong side facing you.
I didn't really pay any attention to which is the wrong side and the right side on this little swatch. And, you know, I probably should have, but I don't remember where I knit it from. So the trick is to just show you how it's going through. In this case, that was more important to me. So this tells me that I'm knitting it on the wrong end. I should have started from the other end because you see that line. Oh, no, wait, that's the right side. Sorry. No, I'm doing it right. Okay. So I began at this corner and I knit this direction. These are my increases there. So it's upside down. The wrong side is facing me and I'm doing my I-cord so that that line shows up on the wrong side. So when I flip it over to the right side, my I-cord edging is going to show on that side. Now, I hope that answered the question. I can't actually see anybody right now because of the screenshotted camera here. So I'm hoping that I'm answering that.
Oh, and
Yeah.
Tina just apologized. She didn't have a question. Her hand was up for some reason.
She just
Caroline
wanted to,
was having that same problem before we started, Tina.
the urge, by the way, at some point when you get distracted is going to just start knitting by picking up. Remember that you always have to slide those stitches over to your left-hand needle first. So yeah, you'll have the wrong side of the shawl facing you as you do the top edge. But the procedure is exactly the same as before. You just were picking up one stitch at a time. Now, if you really wanted to, you could pick up all those stitches in advance and then knit the I-cord off. It's not going to make a huge difference. Me, I don't want to do it that way because I'm lazy and I just want to knit my I-cord on and be done with it. So even though it's not a very big piece of knitting, I'll let the little focusy thing catch up here. You can see that that I-cord, this is the right side, is looking all nice and I-cordy, and I'm not seeing anything weird. On the back, you will see that line. Do not let that worry you. This is what you expect to see. The slip stitch edge on here is there for a reason. If you did a second shawl and you left it off, you'd find that your top would be stretchy and you might have a little bit of difficulty in doing your I-cord and keeping it even. And then the other thing is that between the I-cord and that slip stitch edge, that gives you that nice solid edge that means that you can keep on wearing the shawl year after year without any sagging. Because I've had some designs that caused sagging and they made me sad. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to avoid in this particular design. Now, I did say in the instructions as well that you would need a set of DPNs because you don't have to use a big long needle to do your I-cord edge on here. And when I did the original shawl, I just used 2 DPNs instead of doing my long needle and my DPN. So this is what it looks like once I've picked up my stitch, letting the camera catch up. There's a little wee hole, but I've got the slip stitch and then one more thread. Pass your stitch over, and then it's all finished. It will curl naturally as you get further in and you give it that little tug. So you see how you got that nice rounded edge there. So that's how to do the I-cord on the both sides of the shawl. And like I say, if you loathe and despise I-cord, you don't have to put it on the top edge. I just did because I liked the finished effect and because I do think that it adds a little bit of stiffness up there, which means that again, you'll have less sagging. Okay, Dan, if you want to unspotlight the camera, now I will do the questions and we can do some show and tell. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick glance through the chat here and I'll go back to the beginning and see what I may have missed because I know there's the one there about weird numbers of stitches. Stuck on geometric flowers chart 1, I have 100 stitches on my needles, but there are only 96 stitches on the chart. Okay. I need to figure out what's going on there with Sandra Barrett's question. So Sandra, can you contact me directly and we can work this out? If you want to email me at caroline@ancientartsfiber.com, I would be more than happy to help you with this, but this is going to take just a wee tad of mathing for me. And I don't want to steer you wrong in the middle of a somewhat more restricted scenario, as it were, in terms of our time. So yeah, if you can email me about that one, we'll do a little bit of mathing and figure out what's going on there. And then we have Jay Dumas said, I somehow ended up with 499 stitches on the border instead of 506. So in that case, don't worry about the number of stitches that you had. Somehow something's got knit together and it is not going to hurt this shawl in any way, shape, or form because you're only short 7 stitches on a gigantic border. So just do your I-cord bind off exactly the way that we did here today. And again, you can put the colors on in any way that you want. Don't worry about that. It happens. Just keep an eye out if you've dropped any stitches, because if you drop them, you're going to have to sew them in. But I wouldn't be going back and ripping up or anything like that. I would just sew them in if they're dropped. And if you've done some decreasing, that's okay. My guess is what happened is that you weren't increasing along the edges because it keeps on increasing right to the last row. So that would be my bet, is in that last section, you just stop doing your edge increases. Won't hurt anything. It's very flexible. It's going to block out to be absolutely perfect. So you will see no issues there. Any idea how many grams of contrast color 2 you will have before starting the border? You will notice on the original shawl, there is no contrast color 2 on the border, and that's because there's not much left. When I knit the original shawl, I did end up with 6 grams of yarn in the end, and it wasn't really enough to do much of anything. And on some of your shawls, the pattern is actually written so that that second gold line is done in the red. That's contrast color 3. And the reason for that is that if you're off gauge a little bit, you might not have enough color of contrast color 2 to get that line done. So we put that in to give you an option. And, you know, I had that happen to some of the test knitters. So they had been a little bit off gauge. They ran out of color. So having that in the red won't hurt the look of it at all. It's quite pretty. But I only had 6 grams left after doing that. So you're not going to have much for the border. So contrast color 2 got left behind and left it in the lurch. No love for it in the border. So you won't be using it. Just checking for any more questions. Yep, there's definitely what we were dyeing today on my fingers. Can you say turquoise? Okay, so yeah, more conversation about Sandra's question. And like I say, I'd be more than happy to help with that. So everybody, when you have an issue with the pattern, feel free to contact me at any time. As the designer, that's what I'm here for. And I definitely want to help you get through the whole thing. So Sandra, we will definitely confab together. We can even do a Zoom together so that we can talk it out, and we'll make sure that we get you through that geometric flowers chart. Also, anyone else, if they had a problem with that chart, feel free again to contact me. And like I say, more than happy to help you. So the next thing that we're going to do is show and tell. But before that, let's do another prize giveaway. This one is going to be, and I'm now tormenting Katie and making her stay for the whole thing because I like her. This one is going to be for another Lasco Fine ebook with 14 patterns and tons of fun.
All right, the winner is Arlene Parkinson.
Congratulations, Arlene. So what we'll do is have you contact Wendy, sales@ancientartsfiber.com, and Wendy will arrange to get your ebook to you. It's like 80 something pages long, and there's beautiful photos, and we're very, very proud of that particular book. We were going to get it printed in paper, but we're waiting until the world has enough paper to print books. I don't know if anyone's aware of the fact that even the big magazine companies have actually had problems lately with printing books and magazines. So they've actually had to delay the shipment of the latest interweave knits, and it's only gone out now because they weren't getting enough paper to be able to print the magazine. So yeah, us smaller publishers are feeling the pinch on that one too. So at this point in time, let's do some show and tell, everyone. So the way to keep this organized is if you can do a mechanical hands up, then what we will do is, okay, see there, it was about to raise hand. This is really cool that it does this automatically. Come on, raise my hand. Now it doesn't see it. Useless. That's it, Zoom. I'm out of love with you. So put your hand up. You'll find that when you click on, if you're an iPad or a device, the top right-hand corner, if you're on a computer, down in the bottom corner, and then Dan will let you know who is next, and he will spotlight you so you can show off your beautiful shawls. So Dan, it's up to you.
All right, first we're going to spotlight Jay Dubois. You're on.
And obviously feel
Wow.
free to mute and
Thank
tell
you.
us about your shawl.
So I'm the one who somehow, am I unmuted?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am somehow the one that ended up with 7 stitches too few. And I have a feeling I just stopped adding on, increasing.
Yeah.
And so but I was still able to play with it and make it work at the end.
It looks perfect. And yeah, I would not
So-
worry about that at all.
So what I was really worried about was when the colors changed on the I-cord bind off. So I'll just.
So what I would do is
make it
I would
work.
subtract that 7 stitches from whatever color is in the middle. Let me look at the shawl and tell you how many colors along that will be. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so there's 9 different colors along the bottom border, and there's a great big section in the middle that is the light color. And so I would just deduct your 7 stitches from there.
And that's the 120 rows.
Yeah, and so that'll keep your shawl symmetric in terms of both edges, and you won't have to
Okay.
worry about it looking odd.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
So
I
you
just-
gonna hold it up?
I just want to say thank you. I love it. It looks exactly like the pictures, which I just think is amazing. And the other thing that I
Beautiful.
think is so cool is that even the back of it looks really nice. The back of my knitting never looks this neat. So
Your knitting is beautiful. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for showing the shawl off and for asking that really good
And-
question.
I love it. And this is I'm the one with the husband who really, really hates it when I'm knitting because he thinks I should be itching his back or his head. And even this he thinks is worth me knitting. So
That's
Thank you.
fantastic.
Husband or your dog?
well, the dog too, but yeah, the husband demands even more attention than the dog.
Okay, so if you want to move to the next person, and Tanya Dan was asking how to put her hand up. So why don't you go to Tanya Brownlee, because then she doesn't have to worry about how to do that.
Tanya, you are spotlighted. Hello, Tanya.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
Let me just get rid of the, hang on, there we go. So it's all finished. And the only thing I still have to do is block it the second time. And of course, finish snipping off the little guys here once I've done the block. I really like doing this one. This is my second one. And, I think I would even make a third one if somebody asked me if I would make them one, but in different colors. And, I have to say, I really like the one lady who chose to do the mosaic she had was it the dark on the outside, and then her little birds or whatever were the light color? I can't remember, but I would do something like that or whichever, but completely different. I'm a bit crazy about making sure that my inside is really just as nice looking as my front side. So I use the double stitch bind off, double stitch weaving is what I used. So anyways, that's that one.
Well, it's beautiful,
Looks
Tanya. Thank you
beautiful.
so much for showing it off, and I am so glad that you enjoyed doing it.
Thank you.
All right, Dan, if you want to move to our next person.
Sure. Next, I'm going to spotlight Charlie's iPad.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm the one that did the wrong chart first for the birds, so I'm finishing my second. So their feet are going the opposite way. But I also didn't like this, so I switched. So thanks, Caroline, for suggesting to switch my color. And then on the other end, I'll go back to this color, so it's the same. So I'm nowhere near as far as the ladies that are finished. Congratulations.
Well, that's beautiful. I love it. And I think it's really fun with the birds, and the feet going various ways. That just made me smile. Thank you so much for showing off the beautiful work.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan, if you want to move to the next person.
Next up is Merida.
Hi, this is my shawl. I don't know if you can see it very well because my filter. It's not quite done. I'm still working on the edging, so I don't know if you can see that. 90% there.
Wow.
I chose combo number 2.
Well, it's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing it off. And you've come a long way. By the way, very few people will finish the thing in the time that we had given, and that's just fine. The idea was to get you all knitting, but not to make you feel pressured to have to finish.
Well, considering I work full time and
yeah,
I did pretty good.
You did. It's lovely. Thank you so much for showing your shawl. Okay, Dan, if you want to go to the next.
Sure. Next up, I'm going to spotlight Sandra Barrett.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. Yeah, I decided to go with 6 colors because I'd already wound them.
Cool.
And one's not that different from the other, but it made a huge difference in the contrast. So this is the color slate that I'm doing the middle of the back on.
Ooh.
So that's, you know, like a more subtle combination, just because I did the pewter at the beginning, and then I'd already wound this lighter shade. And I'm at the edge of my capabilities. So I did something wrong. I mean, it doesn't matter because it's just, you know, for me, but on the last set of stitches, I ended up with holes all the way along. And I think it's because I had 102 stitches instead of 100. And so I decreased the number and then I started on my 100, which is why when I got to row 3 of the flower chart, see, I was trying to find where it said, because I've got the answer already, Caroline. Somebody's told me that the beginning 2 and the end 2 aren't in the charts. So that's why I've got 4 stitches at the end, because I didn't understand that. And that's, you know, these 4 odd ones. But it's really hard to take out. I went wrong on row 8 of the mosaic and I was determined to try and do it, but I had to go all the way back to where it started on the solid colors because I couldn't understand how to undo the stitches without dropping some. And so then they dropped about 4 rows and, you know, like I gave up in the end and went back to the beginning of the section. But that's going to be the same here where I do my left and right. So I'm not sure how to like take them back. Do you see what I mean? But I'm sure I can work it out given time.
You'll send me an email because I can give you some tips on doing that. And then there's one thing that I'm going to mention that I use all the time is that when I'm knitting something that I'm worried I might make a mistake in, periodically I just put a lifeline in. And what that is I take just a soap bodkin, you know, that I would darn ends in with, and then I just take a thin piece of yarn and I just thread it through all the stitches. And then if I have to ravel back, I can just drop the shawl off the needles and ravel back, and that thread will actually hold the shawl, and then you can just pick those stitches back up and put them on the needle. So I'll run those every few number of rows, like I'm actually doing a brioche shawl right now, and I run those about every 8 rows because ripping brioche back is something that makes you want to pull your hair out and go bald on. So if I do make a mistake, I can just drop it off the needles, rip back to that lifeline, and then pop it back on the needles. The other thing is that, Dan, can you put a spotlight on the document camera for a minute here? Because I don't think you've made any mistakes in your twisting ribbon section there. So do you see something that looks familiar? See, there's holes there too.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing is that you haven't blocked yours yet. And so they're kind of showing a little more than they will once everything is spread out evenly. So you will see
Oh,
them. See there along that path?
yeah. Oh, okay. So it's not
Yeah,
too bad
you did a
then.
great job, you know, and kudos to you for
Yeah.
taking on something that's a challenge. It's beautiful.
Well, the other thing was I was looking at the errata on your website, and there wasn't anything for page 20 because it assumes you know what you're doing at the beginning and end before you start. But I couldn't work out. There were 3 different dates, and when I looked at the latest errata, it wasn't wrong. So do you change it before people download it?
So page
So there
20
was-
is just the text for the chart. It's not the text for knitting the entire section. It's just the text for the chart. So it doesn't have borders. So every single one of those, and Dan, can you unspotlight the document camera now? So that is just the text for the chart itself. So you have to look at the instructions in the pattern like this, and it'll tell you, do this on the border, then work the chart, then do this on the border. So that's one of the things where you'll see differences between page 20 and what you would be doing in the shawl. So that would be what happened in the geometric flowers. And this is, like I say, it's a really common way that patterns are written. And what it does is it keeps the pattern from being like 30 more pages. So it's kind of irksome in that sometimes you need to have 2 pages side by side so you know what you're doing in each place. Now, in terms of errata, what'll happen is that no matter how many people test knit your thing and no matter how many tech editors look at it, you'll end up with sometimes with little typos or mistakes or something like that, possibly a place where things could be clarified. So what'll happen is that you'll change that, you'll create a new PDF, and then they get pushed out to knitters. So if you have bought it through Ravelry, Ravelry will send an update, and then what you have to do is click the update button, and then you can reprint or re-download the file, and it will have the new text. And it's the same thing through our website, is that it'll push out a new version. So there'll be some changes. Now, it's really annoying with a pattern that's several, like maybe 20 something pages long, to try and figure out where that was, what that change is. So it's really common that when those changes are pushed out, there'll be a note that tells you what it was that changed. Quite often you'll see designers, for example, well, I have this now translated into Scandinavian, so here's the update with the Scandinavian pattern, but you don't have to change anything else. Nothing else changed. It's just another language. So each one of these errata will refer to, we found this error. And if you printed off the very first copy of the pattern and never printed off an updated one, this is what changed. So that's what the errata on the website and Ravelry are for, is to just help you know what changed when we found these things. Because there were a number of different versions of this pattern because we caught a number of things afterwards. Unfortunately, like I say, sometimes you just find these little mistakes and you want to update it because you don't want somebody buying the pattern later on to say, hey, there's a mistake. And then somebody reports the same thing over and over and over. There's a sock designer that I like to buy the patterns from, and it drives me nuts because she never updates her patterns. And then you constantly see people going, oh, by the way, there's a mistake on X. So anyway, that's how it works. And hopefully that's clarified some of that for you. So Dan,
thanks. I've never worked it. I've never used a pattern like this before at all. And so, the whole thing is challenging. I've been doing the slip stitches at the beginning, but when it came, I've just got to take 1 row back, and then I'll be good for my. Excellent. So I don't probably need to email you about that, but thanks. Okay. It's
you're welcome.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't understand, because you've got to keep going back through all these pages, and I found it easier to use the written form of the charts than the actual chart. I'm just, as a beginner doing it.
It's very common that this is the case, and this is one of the reasons why this pattern includes both. And just for general knitting instruction, when you're buying a pattern, have a look at what it says. And if it says charts only, then that might not be the pattern for you if you prefer to work from written text. So look and see how the designer has presented the pattern. And sometimes it might make it lots and lots of pages. Like I was saying to somebody today, one of my very favorite shawls to knit was Andy Peters' Blooming Brioche shawl. It's 36 pages long, but it's because it's both written out and charted. because some people will work better with charts and some will work better with written instructions. All right, Dan, if you want to go to the next person.
Got, oh, sorry, I've got Sarah that has her hand up, but she doesn't have her camera on, so I can't spotlight her. So.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Yeah,
great.
so this is my shawl here. So I just started the border, and I'm hoping, I really didn't like picking up the stitches, but
sorry.
That was a much longer process than I anticipated, but we're done that now. And I've really enjoyed knitting this pattern. I have another bigger project on the go, so I'm using a shorter cord than I probably should have, but it's working okay. And yeah, it's just been really fun, and it was a good experience. And I'm excited to do the I-cord bind off because I've never done that before, and it's something I wanted to do. So thank you.
Well, congratulations on a beautiful shawl, and thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, Dan, if you want to spotlight the next person.
I've got Debbie.
Hello, everyone. I'm kind of late to the party here. I just started my shawl this week. So here is my shawl. So far, it's not very big yet.
It's beautiful. It looks wonderful.
I really have loved working with this long yarn and the stitch definition, and it's just been really nice. I really like it.
That's great.
And actually, you're listening to me through my friend Teresa's audio, because we're together, but we've both got our separate cameras on.
That's so fun.
Yes, so she was telling me about all the, and I love the history. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, so Dan, if you want to take the spotlight off for a moment, what we're going to do is draw for our final prize, because we are reaching the end of our time. Well, we actually passed it some time ago. Now, I would love to keep on doing show and tell, but I do want to let Katie get back to her 2 bathing children. So let's spotlight Katie, and she's going to show us the grand prize for this evening, which is a stunning project bag. So you're going to find Katie there from Atelier Nekazuki. And I'm going to kick in a skein of yarn, but Katie, do you want to show us the project bag and tell us about it?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I've got 2 here, so I gotta make sure we got this straight. What we have here is a small box bag, cat print. It's all Japanese fabrics. And these bags are awesome for shawl knits because they hold about 3 skeins of fingering weight to start. You can always fit more, but that's my suggested amount. Everything is finished inside, so when you start your next project, you don't have any threads unraveling into your project, and you can keep your cats and your kids out of it, or dogs, whichever you have in the house, the critters. Yeah, I make all the bags in my home studio, and I'm actually presenting at Vogue Knitting, so if you want to learn a little bit more about them, that's probably the best place to come and have a deep dive with me this weekend. I'm presenting at 12 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow and Sunday as well. So if you're free, I'd be really happy to see you there.
So just a little plug for Vogue Knitting. It's a really neat online event. So the marketplace isn't just the marketplace. You get a whole bunch of additional things, like there's keynote speeches, and I know that there's things like yoga sessions and all sorts of stuff like that. If you can't make the actual time for things like the keynote speeches, they record them so you can watch them later on. Now, not after the event, but you can watch them, like, for example, in the evening. And the marketplace sessions are really exciting. Like, I know I love going to Katie's because she'll give you, like a tour of how she buys the fabrics, and you'll see her studio and that kind of thing. So seeing the process behind them is so interesting to me. And I'll also wildly plug Katie's bags and admit that I believe I have something like 20 of them because I love them so much. And I am a multiple whip person, and I use them for all sorts of things too. Like I use them to pack my suitcases with, so I'll, be able to segment things. So dear God, the socks cannot get lost. They're all in one of my spare project bags. And they also work really well as yarn bowls. So actually when I was knitting this shawl, I had 2 of the box bags sitting there with the cakes of yarn inside, and it kept them completely organized, and it kept Sprite from stealing them because she's terrible about that. So I really appreciate, Katie, that you could pop by and show off that cute, cute project bag, which I covet desperately.
Well, congrats to all of the winners, and amazing work on all your shawls. That's a lot of work and spectacular. So I hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to skedaddle back off to the kids.
Good. Well, thank you so much.
Good evening.
You
Thanks,
too.
Katie.
You.
And
The
Heather is
winner
gonna-
of Katie's
our
bag
winner.
is Rebecca Gilmore. The winner of the bag is Rebecca Gilmore. I've put the information in the chat.
Cool. Well, congratulations, Rebecca. So you're going to contact Wendy and we'll arrange to get the project bag to you, and we will add a skein of yarn, and you can pick anything from our in-stock yarn. So you don't have to be limited in terms of what yarn you're going to get. So there will be a cake to go home in the bag. Excellent. Okay, so we still have some people who want to play show and tell. Now, I really appreciate your staying longer than the hour, and I personally would look at your shawls all night. So I am more than happy to keep going and to see some more things. So Dan, if you'd like to spotlight somebody who has their hand up, that would be lovely.
I'm going to spotlight Alison Mohan.
Here we go. Hi, I am in the middle of the first I-cord bind off, and it goes slowly, but it goes. But I have really enjoyed this. I'll give you a
wow
length of that. I used a lot more white in it than your original, but I think it shows the pattern really well.
Okay, I will give
And-
you the secret thing, which is that I really wished that I would have had white to put in it in the last go, but because it's a naturally brown yarn, I couldn't. And I may have cheated, and the next yarn coming out is going to be one that can go with the last go because it gives me white.
So yes, the pickup took a long time, but you're having the number of stitches for each section was really great. And someone's idea of putting a stitch marker after you'd done the stitches for each section was fantastic, because you could walk away and come back and not have to recount everything. And some of you saw my posts about having troubles in this section, and doing a few purls instead of knits and having to fix them in the next row, but that all worked. It was way better than undoing two or three rows, and it's all been great. So I've really enjoyed it. Thanks
That's
for
perfect. You know, that's a real skill to be able to drop down in one section and fix your knitting. So, you know, kudos to you. Wonderful. It is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's the first time I've had the border spread out enough to actually kind of wrap it around myself, because I'm getting enough of the I-cord done. So next person.
Next, I've got Linda Archibald.
Hello, wrong side there. I'm using the Ogopogo color.
Oh, that is so fun.
Nice.
Which is your Knit City special color.
Right.
Thought, and it's really nice. I love the depth and the variations in the color here. So it's really coming out nice. And I mean, in a perfect world, if I have enough, I'm going to love to do the whole I-cord border with it, but I'll see when I get there. And then my other colors, I really wanted a pink. So I chose Cozy, which is kind of a dusty pink in here, which goes nice with the dark roast. And dark roast is not too dark chocolatey, but it's got a kind of like a bit of a gray tinge, I thought, to it. So it looks really nice it all together. And I've got the Irish linen in here as well. But I really love these colors, but I'm very happy choosing the Ogopogo.
Linda, we packed up your box in production, and we were thinking that this was a pretty good choice. We were quite happy to see this box go out.
Thank you. Well, this is it. And I'll make sure I've got pictures up when it's all done. But yes, these are good colors.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, it's beautiful, and that was a treat to see. Thank you.
Call from Archibald K.
Okay, Dan, if you'd like to spotlight the next person.
We're going to spotlight Grace Frank next. Whoops, sorry, I think I just did Patty.
Would you, I can go ahead, I'm ready.
Go ahead, please.
So I'm one of the ones that was a real challenge. So I'm not as far along, but I'm loving it. So there I am. And I am loving every minute of this. But I was a couple of things that people mentioned, I was going to pass on. I found a really good thing for using a lifeline is pearl cotton.
Yes.
I'm also a cross stitcher, and the pearl cotton works really well because you can get it in a thin weight, but it's very strong and it doesn't get fuzzy. That works. That's very easy to thread through and pick up stitches with pearl. And
that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And I love both the chart and written forms because I'm learning by comparing the two. I've learned so much about how structure of stuff goes, how the different stitches work together. So I really like both. I use both and go back and forth. And I will just say, showing this, I've sold 2 more of these. Their orders have gone in already. They're probably on their way to my friends. So, you can send my commission anytime. Thank you for letting me knit along with all of you. This is my first real knit along and it's been great. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. And thank you, Patty, for joining us. And it's a treat to see your shawl. And I love the idea of the pearl cotton because the one that I use is something that I swiped from my knitting machine. It's 30 years old and it's kind of looking bedraggled. And that was this waste stuff that they give you that's really slippery, but it keeps losing chunks off of it. So it's only about that long now. So I got to be real careful on where I use it. So yeah, pearl cotton, what a great idea. All right, Dan, you want to pick the next person?
Okay, I'm once again going to try doing Grace. Sorry about that the last time.
Not a problem. I'll be quick. I want to thank you for the beautiful prize. I'm just so thrilled to be able to get that. I'm late to the party, so I just started maybe a week ago. So, and I also was I picked my own colors from the Lasco, and I just had such a blast trying to pick my own memories of being in that area before being in the Amalfi Coast area. And what struck me was the name of the green, the cypress, and I thought, okay, that's exactly what I want to put into mine as my main back color, very panel color.
Right.
Yeah,
I love it. That's going to be beautiful. Yeah, you've chosen really, really fabulous colors. I like that a lot.
So, and I just also got the seal of approval from production.
Well, you know what? It was, and once I got the yarn, I thought, okay, this is going to be my new favorite yarn. I just absolutely adore it. I loved everything about this, and I hope, Caroline, that you will think about doing another pattern that is a history related theme, because I think for me, part of this was just the imagination of what it would be like to be there and to be in the villas, and I was knitting along, and I don't know, it just captured my imagination in a way that nothing that I've knitted before that really did. So, and the other thing I wanted to say is I really get so much out of seeing what the other people have been doing with theirs as well too, and the enthusiasm for this project is infectious. So thanks.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Grace, for that input. I really appreciate it. Your work is beautiful. And like I say, we were all drooling over your color choices, just like, the Ogopogo and Cozy combination. It was like, maybe I'll steal that. Then again, that would be rude.
I always find it so brave when people choose something other than what's in the pictures, because sometimes it can be quite tricky, especially like we get to in production and at the studio, we get to play with the colors. We can pull out bins and boxes and we can mix and match everything and kind of go, no, that shade's not quite right, or this green's a little bit better. So I always think it's quite brave to be able to kind of look at what's on the computer screen and go forth with confidence and choose something that's not pictured or that's not already kind of kitted.
Well, and it was helpful though for I might have picked a different light color, but when you had said before that the linen, Irish linen was going to come out to be a light color, that was really helpful for me. And I love the moussaka color. I just love that color. It's just perfect for this. So
on
yeah.
another project, Grace, you should try moussaka, baby aubergine, and fortuitous.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a little comment. I love the idea that people are enjoying my little history tour with the shawl. And actually the last few that I've done, they're all story shawls as I think of them. I can't do it without, actually, when I think about it, one of the designs I did about 6 or 7 years ago is a story too. So they all have a story and a journey as part of them. And in fact, one that I did for Vogue Knitting is so much of a journey that I named it the Journey Shawl, because it's my trip through my knitting history for the last X number of years. So I had a lot of fun with that. So I am definitely going to do more of these, but I really like the archaeological side to it. So yeah, we'll have more of those. So Dan, do we have any more hands up?
We do. We've got Donna C is up on deck.
Hi there. I am embarrassed and exactly.
Love it.
Almost last and definitely least. I would like to point out that it took a while for my friend the nurse to figure out what color she wanted there. And I have 4 cats, and they have all helped wind yarn. This was a little longer, and I foolishly left it out. I should have won the bag. And finally, yes, the yarn is lovely to work with. It is just absolutely heavenly. It reminds me of the first time I got yarn from you at Knit City, Vancouver, and I bought some lasso worsted, and it's still functioning quite well for a hat. It's still a lovely hat on somebody else's head, and he lives up in northern BC, so he's pretty darn happy about it too. And he's a pig, so he doesn't. It's amazing that it's lasted. And the archaeological thing, yes, I love it too, because I took art history courses as electives for my science degree. It's a nice balance, I thought. So this definitely reminds me of that. Also, though, I have made a few things for Bad Anna's in Vancouver, is collecting things to send off to the Ukraine or Poland for the Ukraine. And so that's what I've done the last little bit instead of I started this today, it is true, so that I can have something to show. I'll do more later. Thank you again very much. And one last thing though, I didn't use patterns until I retired. I knit socks all the time, and I didn't use pattern because we didn't have patterns. I'm from Northern Quebec and maybe old. So reading your pattern was a little daunting, but listening to all the explanations in this knit along has been fantastic. And I know that I'm going to be able to do it. I know it. So thanks again. And I'll see you next knit along, maybe? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Starting at the beginning of April. Now, it's not my design, but it is going to be a hoot. And it's another one that's really well supported. So Interweave have been having so much fun putting together blog posts and videos, and they are just like, they send me all these excited emails constantly about, oh my God, we did this. And of course, we're going to have at least 1 or 2 Zoom sessions too for the fun of it. So we'll be knitting along with everybody at the same time. And the designer of that shawl is somebody who is super talented and writes really good patterns. So yeah, I think you're going to really get that one. Now, one of the things is that you want to win one of the project bags. There's still another one I'm going to be drawn for on social media. So I think it would be really cute and really amusing. You should post your teeny shawl, because if you post it anywhere in our Facebook group or on social media and tag us so that we can find you, use the hashtag if you're on Instagram, because then it's permanent. The @ tags disappear after a while, but that one will be permanent. And then I will be drawing for more prizes. So there's a sweater's worth of yarn,
Oh my.
a project bag and skein again, and then I forget what the heck I had for the third one. Oh, it's a pack of notions.
Oh, well, I posted it on Facebook, but I don't know about whether tagging, I don't know. I'm a little
If it's
old.
on
And
Facebook, I'll find it. You're entered. You can post as
I
many
just put it on, when I finish
Yeah.
this last really important row. Never
You can
mind.
post as many times as you want for as many entries as you want. The only thing is you can't post the same photo every time because I will notice.
I am totally going to knit some more rows. Don't worry.
Very
Thank
cool.
you again. Take care.
You too. Okay, more hands up.
Sure, we've actually still got another 4 hands up here. So Brenda Blair. Oh, she does not, you need to turn on your video, Brenda, so that we can spotlight you.
Right.
Oh,
So
there we go.
Oh, I can see myself.
There we
you
go.
There we go. Perfect.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so I had the kit number 3, the combo number 3. And I have to say, like, getting the history and seeing how the colors in the slide deck then kind of match the combo kits. Because initially, when I looked at the different combo kits, I'm a bright color person. And when I saw kind of the neutral tones, I'm kind of going, well, I'm not sure. But once I saw the slideshow, I just went, oh, now I get it. This is where the inspiration came from. And then it clicked for me. Then I was just like, this is awesome. One of the things that I did, because I hate ends, I do not like sewing in ends, is I used a little trick that I learned in a shawl class, which is you wrap the yarn. Oh, I can hear Caroline smiling in the background there. Wrapping the yarn around your needle, giving yourself about an inch, and then you kind of do this interesting split on it. And so I don't have ends. I'll have the end at the very beginning, and I'll have a tail at the end, and that's it. And it's been working really well. I'm really pleased because you still get the nice edges, and you can't tell that I've done that split splicing technique. So yeah, so that's mine. Combo number 3 with the hap split splicing to alleviate the ends.
Well, that's absolutely beautiful. And I love that you did that because I did that too. And just before the meeting, I was actually showing a couple of people, there's a spot where I was half a stitch off on my splice. So in the original, you can actually see it.
Oh, funny.
Okay, I'll give it away.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And lovely to see your shawl. Okay, now I can't even find it.
So next I'm going to spotlight Jessie.
There it is.
Hello. There. Okay, I did picked up my own colors. They're actually in some ways fairly similar to the original, but just a shift over. I'm just on the I cords on the top. So we have wheat, bring it closer, maybe the color better, Berrylicious, Beach Paradise, Indus Valley, and Papaya. I think I got them all.
Love it. That's fabulous. It's so warm.
Very much enjoying it.
You can totally see that. It's like the one with the Ogopogo. Both of them make me think of the mosaics where they'll have like the sea scenes. So you might have sea serpents and, what is his name? Poseidon and that sort of thing. That's beautiful.
Okay, I'm going to spotlight Rebecca Gilmore next. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for putting this together. I'm actually, Caroline, we've had a couple conversations on Instagram. I'm a Roman archaeologist. And so when I saw the shawl come up, I was like, okay, well, I can't not knit this. And I've stuck with the traditional colors that Caroline chose because I didn't think I could beat them. Like I went through everything that I could find, and I just felt like, you know, they were just the right colors for the project. But what I did do was I added a little bit of sort of like an eggplant, aubergine, amethyst purple at the end, because what they would have done is in some of the higher status villas is crushed up sea whelks to get like a purple powder, and then use the sea whelk powder to create a paint. And so I've added the purple to kind of, you know, just because I just couldn't not add something. So I've put it on the ends, and then I've put a couple of stripes throughout the pattern. But thank you so much for, you know, designing something that was archaeology inspired, history inspired, and then presenting it so lovely. It's been such a pleasure to attend the knit alongs, and then also, you know, produce something that's kind of really creative, but also expressive of, you know, what I do for a living. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're so welcome. And thank you for joining us here. We had such wonderful conversations. I wish I could share them with everybody else, but it would take forever. And I've had so much fun, and I do hope that we keep on chatting, you know, down the road, because it was just, you know, it was so gratifying and so enjoyable. And I love your putting the purple in there. I'm like, oh my God, that is brilliant. And I really like the extra stripes, and it was so hard to behave myself and not put more of that in and get more flamboyant yet. But the purple is the perfect touch.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you for showing it off. It's gorgeous.
So the last person I have to spotlight is Catherine.
Hi, everyone. I'm not that far along. I'm on, I have the third combination as well. So I'm just starting what I affectionately call the Twisted Sisters. So I'm really loving it. My friend Louise brought my attention to it. She's on camera as well. And Sylvia, my friend, has joined us. I, 20 years ago, got 2 degrees in classics. And I built a 3-dimensional model with a partner of a hypocaust system. So I've loved the history, and I've loved just listening and remembering and seeing the wonderful slides. So Caroline, thank you. I'm really enjoying the project.
Well, you're so welcome, and I'm so glad. And isn't it fun that we get to use these degrees that we didn't know we were going to do anything with?
Yeah,
just
exactly.
When I was doing my classics one, I could not resist writing a paper that deeply disturbed some of my professors on the idea of the Romans used to keep children as pets, and it's creepy and weird to us, but it made total sense to them. And I wrote this big long paper, and I'm like, what's a really interesting thing? Could that turn into a shawl? And then I thought, that's going to worry people, but you know, it's fun to be able to do these things and do something with it.
My master's thesis was on the use of the double-bitted axe in the Aegean Bronze Age. So go figure.
That's cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And you know, you may not be that far into the shawl yet, but what you've got done is absolutely lovely.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. All right, so if everybody who wants to share has shared, then we should probably draw this to a close so that people can get on with their evenings. But I really want to thank you all very much for joining us. This has been such a fun knit along for me. And, you know, I got to admit, it's been really good for my my ego really to see people enjoying the kind of things that I like to do, because one of the things that I always say to my staff is that yarn should make you happy. And it's really good to know that what we do is achieving that goal. So making people happy is like one of the best things that I think you can do in life, because there's all too much negativity out there in the world, and putting a little bit of positive back, I think, helps to balance it. So once again, thank you. And we do have another KAL coming up. I'm just going to blurb it for you because it's a really pretty shawl. So it's got a kind of cumbersome name. It's called the Ancient Gemstone Shawl. And this one is done in partnership with Interweave. So if you want to do another one of these and you want to have 2 shawls going at once, you could definitely join it. It is a beginner level project, and they have a ton of support, like I said a little bit earlier, that they have arranged for it. So there's going to be weekly blog posts and various different technique videos. I think they wanted me to do something and then they published something on it anyway. You know, we will have a Zoom session at least once. So very well supported, and it will have some new techniques and stitches. And then Lana Joy, who is the designer, is going to join us as well. And she is absolutely brilliant. You will have to check out her body of work because my God, she's amazing. Her lace shawls, there's nobody else like her. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So this one has a lot of really interesting stitches, but they are rated beginner level, and I think we're all going to learn something really fun for it. The other thing is that we have a sponsor, Chowgu, who is working with us, and Chowgu is my favorite metal needle maker. So the kits that we have for them include a Chowgu needle courtesy of them, which is very, very exciting. So, you know, you have the right needle, you'll have your yarn, you'll be able to just like dive in and have multiple shawls on the go. So anyway, thank you. And don't forget to post on social media. You've got 2 more days to do that so that we can do the grand prizes for everybody. And, you know, I wish you the best of luck on that. So have a great weekend, everybody. And, you know, I look forward to seeing you in the next KAL. Bye, everyone.